Great. Should we start?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight on this gorgeous rainy night. It's very romantic. So welcome to Sotheby's Institute of Art, New York. I'm Christine Kuan, the director and CEO. And tonight we are hosting our third annual Women Leaders in the Art Market panel. Before we get started, and for all of our friends who are joining us online, we have an open house in Sotheby's Institute, New York on October 2nd. For those of you, sorry?
No, sorry.
Okay. For those of you who want to come visit the Institute, we will have an open house on October 2nd. If you have questions about that, Susan Roth and various admissions people are here to answer questions, so talk to them about that. So tonight, it is my great pleasure to introduce some of the most exciting and dynamic leaders in the art market, and also friends of mine from various work experiences, starting with Marina Cashdan, who is the Vice President of Editorial and Creative at Artsy, which is, I believe, now the most widely read online art publication worldwide. So congratulations, Marina. Next to Marina is Leila Heller. And Leila is the founder and president of Leila Heller Gallery, which was originally founded in 1982, most recently just moved to the High Line, and you have the largest gallery in the Middle East in Dubai at 15,000 square feet, and one of the most important galleries representing emerging and established artists. Welcome, Leila. And next to Leila is Ambre Kelly, co-founder and also an artist, co-founder of Spring Break Art Show, one of the most exciting art shows in New York City, I think, and I know all of you are looking forward to seeing Spring Break if you haven't seen it this coming spring in New York City. So we'll hear more about that. Welcome, Ambre. And last but not least, Alia Williams, director of Jeffrey Deitch Gallery, and welcome, Alia. She is also one of our Sotheby's Institute alumna, as is Leila Heller. So welcome, both of you. So thank you so much for joining. So I know all of you have read and studied their biographies before you came, so I'm not going to read all of their extensive backgrounds and experience. We do have flyers of everybody's bio available for you, and it's also on our website if you would like to know more. So tonight's panel, we're just going to start off with some questions, and then we're going to open it up to all of you to ask questions. And we also invite people online to submit their questions, so we'll try to answer those too. So let's kick it off, because I think one of the things that's really topical right now is women leaders and also the art market. It's an expanding field. There's so much going on, and it's a very opaque industry. So I'd love to hear, and I'm sure everyone in the room would love to hear, how you began your career and climbed to the top of your field, because I think that's really a mystery for a lot of people who want to work in the art world. So let's start with Marina.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my background is in editorial. So my early career was really in the positions of learning and absorbing, internships, then editorial associate positions, and the like. And eventually, as I progressed there and learned there, that wasn't a very, I'd say, glamorous early entry, though not many entry-level positions are, but then at magazines and print magazines, it was a lot of learning, absorbing, etc. Eventually, I got to a point where I was managing people, really starting with one and then growing that. And then at various points in my career, whether it, from magazine to magazine, or when I left Modern Painters and before Artsy, I was doing some independent work, freelance contracting. I was consulting via request from somebody who approached me. So it was interesting to go from a management role to working for myself and being more proactive. And then ultimately I landed at Artsy, where I was really tasked at creating the voice and the governance for all the content for the database first, for the first 3 years I was there. And ultimately building a team to create our editorial voice, which is a more authoritative, independent voice. So it was really both creating that and also building a team. So I built a team from scratch, starting with one, myself, and ultimately we've grown to 18 people. So it's been a wild journey and an awesome one. Christine, you were on that journey as well for part of
those are fun times.
My time at Artsy. But it's for me, it's not been a ladder. It's really been almost like a rock climbing wall. Or I know Paola Antonelli. We just interviewed her for a series that will launch, and she described the it being more like being on a surfboard versus a train, and I relate to that analogy. That's my career has been a lot of sort of the back and forward and not so clear-cut ladder. I think that's just reality for me. So that's
Thank you so much, Marina.
Yeah.
Leila, I think, we would love to hear from you because I think there's been so many articles lately about galleries closing. It's a very challenging business to be a gallerist, and you've been successful for decade after decade. Can you talk a little bit about how you started and what made you so successful?
Well, success is sort of a vague thing in the art world, because what does success mean? Does it mean financial? Does it mean achieving something? Being in the art world has to be a passion. It cannot be for, I'm going to make so much money like you do if you're in investment banking or even a lawyer or this and that. It has to be a passion, and it's a challenge. Working in the art world is every day. When you said about it's a rock climbing, it is cliff climbing or whatever it is. But it is a challenge because, it's a luxury business. And basically, it's like right now, if there is a recession or there is a problem in the world, you are the first to be affected, because people need food, people need housing, but they don't need art. Art is a luxury and beauty and wonderful. So it can be challenging to be in the art world and go with the flows of either politics or recessions or this and that. I've been through many of them, and I've gone up and then come up again and then down again and up again. But it has always been a journey of passion. And for me, success is not, having made so much or done so much and have a very comfortable life. For me, success has been that my artists are in major museums. So to each person, it's like, what is success? Yeah. And this was a career that was an accident for me. Sort of, so I, again, fell into it because of circumstances, which we can talk about later if you wish.
Thank you. That's really great. Ambre, spring break, I always love going to. There are so many art fairs all over the world. What is special about spring break, and how did you and Andrew found spring break? What was the impetus behind that?
Spring break, it's our baby, So Andrew and I met in 2008. I moved to New York City in 2006 on a little white lie. I told my parents that I had a job interview, which I did not. And I came up here and I didn't go back home, which was in the South. I had some friends who wanted to support me, and I got a job immediately working for a very big fashion house. And I had just graduated from graduate school. I had a degree in painting. What was I doing in fashion? And I learned some production through that job, and I quit the day after the fashion show happened because I'm an artist. And so then I met Andrew a couple of years later, and we, both artists, we were kind of like, what's going on? Like, there's a recession. It's 2008. No one's taking chances. Everyone's scared. I mean, it's exactly what Leila is talking about. It's a luxury. But we had so many friends who we thought were so creative and so talented, and we were just like, we have to keep doing this. We have to create a platform for artists to have an outlet. So if you can't get into a gallery, if you can't get representation, what do you do? You put on art shows. And so we started with one-night art events. And then we actually did it in this old abandoned Catholic church gym. And we had this really big event, and way too many people, and broke every rule in law probably that existed. But from that, the church actually contacted us a couple of years later when their school closed. They had like a Catholic school that went out of commission. And they were like, do you have any ideas for what to do in here? And we were like, oh yeah, we've got some ideas. So that's how Spring Break started. We had a space, and we were like, what do? We want to show our friends' work. We want to work with people who are talking about ideas of this moment. So Spring Break is a curator-driven art fair. An art fair is always kind of in quotations because it's an exhibition. It's a theme. Every year we provide a theme. We ask curators to submit. And then we have fun exploring those ideas and showing it in an exhibition, but also selling the work in a very real way so that artists can sustain themselves. And it's really about that. It's, seeing 3 artists who have shown with Spring Break in this fucking amazing show at Deitch, Punch. I'm like a proud mama, you know. I see like artists being represented by galleries who have started with us, and it's a wonderful feeling. That's what gives us joy and the passion to continue.
Well, one of our artists showed with you,
Yeah, of course.
Rachel Armenia.
Yeah, I know. I love her work.
That's great, and it's a perfect segue to Alia. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your early beginnings and how you arrived at Deitch.
Yeah, well, it was a lot shorter than the careers of these really accomplished women that are sitting next to me up here on the stage. But I'm originally from Chicago. I got my art history degree at University of Illinois in downstate Illinois. The art market in Chicago is very emerging. It's not like New York where there are just opportunities around every corner. So very early on, I knew I just needed to be in New York at any cost. And I did some research and learned about the Sotheby's Institute program, and I was like, that's my way. That's how I'm getting to New York. So I applied and got in, and it really opened so many doors for opportunities, just learning how the art market works, because it's something that I just really didn't understand in Chicago. And that led me to, after I graduated, jump around a few different aspects of the industry. I worked at an auction house. I worked at Sotheby's, the auction house. I worked for our production fund, which is an art nonprofit that puts on regional public art throughout New York and then also along the East Coast and also in LA. And then I also worked at an art fair, Art on Paper. So all the while I was still just trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I went to Armory Show a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago, and saw Jeffrey sitting in the booth, which was our Armory Show presentation of the Florine Stettheimer Collapsed Time Salon. And to be honest, I just thought it was really amazing to see him sitting in the booth. When do you ever see like Larry Gagosian sitting in his booth? Never. So I went up to him and just said, thank you so much for this really wonderful presentation. It was incredible. It just blew my mind. And he stood up and asked me who I was and what my background was, and it just so happened that he was looking for some help. And so it was pure coincidence, and a few months later I started working for him. So since then it's been an insane journey of learning through someone who is extremely generous with his knowledge and his time, and it's just been really, really incredible.
I love that story, and I love all of your stories, because I think one of the challenges, a lot of people start working in the art world, but they also don't know how to continue climbing in the art world. And many people get sort of internships, or many people get sort of, entry-level jobs, and they don't become VP of editorial, they don't become director of Deitch, they don't establish their own gallery or found their own art fair. And if you could talk a little bit about how you navigated that surfboard or the rock climbing wall, and what sort of drove you to get to the top?
Shall I answer this? I think Leila said it perfectly. It's passion. And it's a lot of hard work. I don't think you get to these positions easily. There's a lot of hard work and time and energy, and you know, I see that as something that's always, you know, and passion that drives you forward, even in the times where you feel like you're being pushed down, you know, relative to whatever experience you're having. But the passion, if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to get to the top. It requires that to keep going. So I think most certainly. So I took your answer, actually, or built on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think at the end of the day, something that really pushes me and people that I'm working with is that we're just representing incredible artists and incredible talent. And at the end of the day, especially working at a gallery, you are entrusted with their livelihood and trying to better their career and get them into institutions and have them work with really wonderful people in fairs. So if that's the main goal, then you are just continuing to work towards
give
that.
them a platform. We've all given artists platforms in various ways.
So true.
What about, I think everybody here, I think everyone in the room, everyone who's joining us on Facebook, you know, we all are passionate about art. I'd love to talk a little bit about education and what you learned in the business that sort of changed how you operate in the art world. So, you know, what have you learned that really helps you do your job?
Well, I studied painting.
Yeah.
So how painting and creating an art fair correlates, I don't know. But it's still art, so it's still connected in that way. I think that as an artist, I'm always seeking a community and like people to talk about ideas. So I think essentially getting to the place where production, learning how to do something like this, like actual logistics of this requires certain things. There has to be toilet paper. Like all of those things you really have to think about, like life, like how do you give someone a good experience? And what is that experience? And then what are you trying to communicate through that experience? I think we're living in a time now where voices matter and what we say is really important. There's not a lot of room for like frivolousness, in my opinion. So I think that coming from the art world, or coming from an artistic practice background, I learned that I wanted community, and that's where creating this art gathering came from. What I learned outside of my education was huge. I got to work with a consultant who taught me so much. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was like a paid graduate program in business to be able to work. I used to work with Design Miami. I was kind of as a consultant for that, I would say I was more like a fixer. So I had to know every aspect of the production. I had to know the people. I had to know the VIPs. I had to know what people wanted secretly and overtly. You know, like you really need to know what's happening. So I learned a lot through those experiences right after grad school, and then took that on with me when Andrew and I started working together.
Leila, do you want to talk about what you've learned in the business?
I feel education is a very important part of my life in terms of my career, but it was more because of not just having the security of having learned. I mean, I was an economics major who then took a course in art history, and my the head of my art department was an amazing man, Kermit Champa, who had written books on Monet and Mondrian. These were his two specialties. And so I learned a lot from him, and I then switched my major to art history. And so I graduated and was the second year of the Sotheby's Institute, which at the time was called Sotheby's Arts Program or something. And mine was in London, because that was the only existing Sotheby's Institute at the time, and it was one of the most amazing years because I learned a lot in art history. But then at Sotheby's, I also it was more a work yet education together, because you finally felt the artworks and you dealt with them. And I had some very funny stories that happened to me. And once they brought me some twigs, and I said, "What am I supposed to do with that?" They said, "Well, you have to put it down. It's for the contemporary art department." I said, "Well, what am I going to do with a set of twigs? Who is this?" And they said, "Well, it's an artist named Christo." I said, "Well, where's the wrapping, and did it come, wrapped?" And they said, "Yeah, but we threw it all out." So, I mean, these are things you learn at Sotheby's that it doesn't happen in a college. And so I said, "Well, I went to my boss. He said, 'Well, go find the wrapping and rewrap it.' I said, 'But is it my work? Is it Christo's work? Whose work is it?" So anyhow, I had to go into the garbage of Sotheby's and to try to, and it had gone from shoot to shoot. And, finally, I went with this clerk and we found it. And I wrapped it, and then we auctioned it for £3,000 at the time. So, but these are experiences that you learn at work. That was for education, which was actually much more practical. Or, when I was in undergraduate, my graduate school, I took a graduate course on Mondrian. I met Lisa Dennison, who became a very close friend of mine. She was the director of the Guggenheim. She's now the chairwoman of Sotheby's. Now, later in life, after I finished Sotheby's, I decided, okay, I'll go to, I found out that they're looking for curators in Iran because they were opening one of the biggest museums of contemporary arts anywhere. And so I decided to go and learn, get a graduate degree in art history and museum management. And I was going to go back there, but the revolution happened. I was without a job, without money, without parents who were separated, no passport to go anywhere. And I called Lisa, who had just found an assistant curator at the Guggenheim. I ended up there. So, connections you make, where you study, where you work, these are key things that form you in life. And through Lisa, I met Jeffrey Deitch, who then curated one of my first shows, 1984, called Cali Graffiti, which we together then redid it in 2012 with new artists. So, it's how you take advantage of who you meet. And in the art world, it's all about your connections and who you meet. These days you have all these, you have a better way of connecting and keeping in touch with your colleagues. Because you have the internet, you have emails, you have this. We didn't have any of that. It was just like, who do we call? And then, are they in New York? Not. So you through your connections, you can really get job searches, you can connect with one another, and you never know.
That's really true.
Yeah.
Marina and Alia, do you want to talk about your educational backgrounds and what were sort of influential factors?
I'd say early on, I grew up in New York City, so I had the advantage of being in a city where I was taking it in and absorbing, but also in a very artistic neighborhood in Soho, where I was very much encouraged to lean into my interest in art and specifically dance at the time, and while also honing my academic skills. That was definitely something my parents felt strongly about, my father. And I'd say New York City public schools a large part of who I became, and and then my surroundings. So I think it's both academic and really environmental. I wound up at Barnard College, decided not to leave the city. I was also dancing professionally at the time. So, all these things, again, like you can't always predict what's going to happen. I decided to both continue dancing and go to an academic school versus a dance conservatory. And Barnard was an exceptional school. I wasn't as involved in the sort of community of it. In hindsight, I wish I was, but I had New York City, there, and I could hone my skills and apply my skills in actual learning environments where, as you say, they're practical. Getting internships, being able to get internships at like a major magazine in my freshman or sophomore year, or I was one of the early members of Nylon. I was sitting next to which people may not know anymore, but then it was a cool magazine. It was just starting. I was working next to the editor-in-chief, Marvin Scott Jarrett, like literally making this magazine. So yeah, I also think relationships are important, and the connection between left brain and right brain, and academics and creativity, or strategy and creativity. I mean, there's so many things that are going to influence you. And community. I think community, and within that, building trust within a community has enabled me to go further with those relationships stronger along the way. So I'd say not only to build your networks, but be genuine, develop trust within that community, and partnerships. Because often you meet someone and it may not be, nothing will click then other than, you know, personality and interest, but later on there's something that just works beautifully, and you combine efforts or expertise or so on and so forth. So there's a lot of like actual academic education, but also just like real life work, learn and continue to learn. Education. I'm still learning every day, and that's one of the reasons I've stayed at Artsy and love it there. It's because I will continuing to learn. So yeah, and knowledge sharing between peers. I think that's been some of the most, especially at a place like Artsy where people are coming from all different backgrounds, like absorb. Yes. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
And Alia.
Yeah, I would agree just how important community and relationships are. You really never know. I started working with Jeffrey, and he shortly after hired someone who also went to Sotheby's Institute but did the London program. And just through both of our connections and people that we went to school with, people that she knew within her network and other people that I knew in New York, it's really opened up a lot of doors in terms of who we're able to connect to, and also just really strengthened our relationships outside of the wonderful people that we've met through Jeffrey. Also, another thing that's kind of crazy is that I feel like part of the reason that Jeffrey hired me is because of his own connections. Our production fund used to be across the street from our Worcester Street Gallery, and I worked with them for about a year. And I love Casey and Kathleen. It was what they do is absolutely incredible. And so for him to see that I worked with them for a year, that was almost a pre-qualifier, and also going to Sotheby's Institute, because he knew them and he knew how hard they worked, what important programming they were always trying to put forth. And so for me to have worked with them, that's also something that's just, it really becomes a small world, and building that community and also trusting that community and building that trust is extremely important.
So I think that's a great segue. I think the way you talk about Jeffrey, of him being one of your mentors, I'd love to hear from each of you about your early mentors and the people who really influenced you to go into this field and supported you, and what difference that made to your careers. So whoever wants to go. Maybe we start with you, Alia.
Okay. Well, I've talked about Jeffrey a lot, but he really has been just a really incredible person to learn from. He has over 50 years of experience in the art world, and just to be in contact with the important artists and curators and collectors that I would never really be in contact with otherwise, or it would at least take me a really long time to be in contact with them, has been really an incredible experience. And also just in terms of the artist, something that has really always been important to Jeffrey is relationships, and he started out as an artist, and so maintaining those relationships and really working towards promoting their careers and just nurturing them in any way has been something that I've always really connected to. And I've been really happy and fortunate to be able to work even closer with the artists that we're putting on such incredible shows with. And Punch is actually a perfect example of that, because it is also curated by an artist. The show is curated by Nina Chanel Abney, and it's been really wonderful getting to know her and really opening up doors for these incredible artists that I really didn't know that much about. And so it's been a real journey for me to research them and get to know them. And it's also been really kind of crazy and difficult because I'm also learning myself, and so to kind of go through that learning process with an artist, and they're asking me questions, and I'm like, I think you should do it this way, I don't know, but why don't we just try it? That's also been really incredible, and it's incredible that Jeffrey kind of allows that learning process to happen.
Leila, how about you?
I think I sort of mentioned
yes,
it, like,
you mentioned some of
my,
your professors.
Lisa. Sort of, yeah, and then Lisa Jeffrey, as I've learned a lot from him through our friendship through the years. I've had my gallery for 37 years, so I feel like the art world is such that you learn every single day because it's evolving all the time. I mean, I have in the audience, I have Melanie, who was a graduate, Brandon, who's almost a graduate, and I learn every day from them, and I learn from my son, who's also their age, because it's all new things that come up, and there are many moments of insecurity that I have because I've said, my God, I don't even know anything, anymore, because things change. And they learn from me, from my experience, and from, the new generation just, moves on very quickly. But, there's something to be said in this profession to sort of like step back and then, with a client to, take time, know them. They don't have patience for any of this, but I learn other things from them. So, and, trust, things that, a client develops through time after you see them for quite a long time, or, so sometimes, we do things because the younger generation asks for that, but then we switch back to the old ways because it works better, and vice versa. So it's a learning curve every day.
Early mentors, some of the very accomplished, strong women in my life. My aunt was an early member of a nonprofit environmental group called Trust for Public Land, and I remember, started in New York City, built most of the community gardens that many of them still exist, thankfully. But I remember when I first started managing, would talk to her a lot, and she emphasized how important your team is. Hire people that are smarter than you or better at you at something that, and give them the freedom and be a sounding board and support them and help them grow. And that's always stuck with me, even, with the team of 2 or 3 and now with the team of 18. So she was definitely an early influence for me. In the writing side, my mother was she taught literature at Stuyvesant, and she passed away when I was very young, but many of her friends remained very, very close to me, and one of them was a writer named Frank McCord, who was very inspiring, and less sort of his personal side, and would joke about that, but more in sort of his writing career, and later in his life. So I had early mentors, and then really, honestly, the last few years, as you said, Leila, my peers and my colleagues, I think that knowledge share is super important. I think reaching out to your peers, to meet regularly, to discuss, to talk about what your challenges are, what your accomplishments have been, where the industry is moving, whether it's art or media and editorial, digital media. So those are so super valuable to me. And in a way, my peer relationships, whether in Artsy or my peers across the media landscape or art world, have been whom I've learned from the most. And similarly, I think I'm giving them knowledge. So I encourage that. That's been probably bigger for me and more influential than like one specific mentor.
Ambre?
So this is going to be super corny, but my parents, they were entrepreneurs. They worked for themselves, and I saw that. I was surrounded by them, always kind of having to figure out the business, and they're not part of the art world. They don't understand the art world. They try. They come up and help us with spring break, which is super sweet and kind of obnoxious, but really great. But they really kind of instilled in me like a work ethic, and this is how you do it. And if you say you're going to do something, you do it, and you give people your word, and that kind of goes back to trust. So my parents are, they're great. For that, and they're also great because they, in not being part of this world, they respect my desire to pursue being an artist, pursue having these big events that people come to, and to look at art and support artists. So that's cool. And the career part of that, I'd say Susan Ainsworth, who is the woman that I worked for, she kind of showed me, she kind of opened the doors. She kind of pulled the gates open for the art world for me and showed me, like, what do you do? This is how you deal with things. This is who you know, what you need to do and how you approach it. And that was really something that's invaluable. I can't even tell you from that experience. And then, you know, meeting Andrew, he convinced me to quit my job, which was really a crazy idea at the time. Like the recession, it was September 2008, recession starting, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got to pull back a little bit, and I have to understand what I want out of this world and out of this life. And for that, it was about going back to the artist, going back to myself as an artist, and working to kind of build a community. So yeah, that's
great. And all such different stories. One of the quotes I wanted to read was from Zaha Hadid, who once said, "You really have to believe not only in yourself, you have to believe that the world is actually worth your sacrifices." And I'd love to hear from you as women in leadership positions. Were there any sacrifices or challenges to getting to where you are today? That's kind of a tough question. But it is women leaders in the art market, so I have to have one question. None. We've made no sacrifices.
We made so many
So many.
sacrifices. So many, too many sacrifices, if anything. Well, you sacrifice so much for your artists because, you know, you want them to be in museums. So you take such as almost nothing cut so that the artist gets in a museum. Or, you know, basically, I don't know, I came from feeling that that was to me success, not making money. So I think that you make a lot of sacrifices. You have to fly, you know, to see museum directors, museum curators, and maybe nothing happens, and then things happen. So, and then, you know, you have children, you know, who picks them up from school, things like that. You sacrifice a lot to be in this profession. Zaha actually was a very close friend, and I did their biggest gallery show ever. In my gallery in Dubai when she passed away. She was on her way, actually, after getting the Riba Prize, coming to Dubai to give a talk, but it never happened. But to me, she was a role model because she was a Middle Eastern woman from Iraq, and to have achieved what she did in a domain where it's mainly male-dominated is quite impressive. Because really, if you look at the museum directors in America or Europe, or you look at the gallery owners or curators, it's all a male-dominated society. Since I am also from the Middle East, I sort of always wondered if she was raised the way I was. And my mother empowered me that I'm, you know, maybe it was one of those things that they had to prove it, but like I was probably more powerful than any man in the world, and that I could do everything. And so nothing, you know, many things in life changed. Many recessions came. I never stopped fighting. So I feel my life has been fighting all the time to get somewhere. But what was interesting is when I opened my gallery in Dubai, I realized that women have so much power. I became so much more secure about my role as a woman by having a gallery there, because everything in the art world there is run by women. Every museum director, every curator, every artist, they're all the best. And all the gallery owners are women. So I felt very empowered there. Whereas here, you know, I'm one of the women. So trying to get there and compete with the men, which is almost like impossible in a Western society.
That's super interesting. Really interesting.
It was a shock to me. So, but it was very empowering.
That's fabulous.
Sacrifices, I mean, I have to say I feel lucky that I haven't had to make many sacrifices, particularly in family life, as I've had a family. But maybe early on, you know, startup world, you do make salary sacrifices to really join a team where you have a vision. So certainly my first few years at Artsy were about, you know, reaching or getting, at least laying the foundation for that vision, and that's changed over the years, but you have to really believe in it. So I think, that's certainly been was a sacrifice early on. I think now as a parent, it's like you have to create the guardrails, and I feel very lucky I've been able to do so in an environment like Artsy. I've been very supportive of families and women specifically, women and men, but women who I think I can say it, generally take on a little bit more in the parenting, the role of parent. So I feel very lucky I haven't had to make a lot of sacrifices, at least in my personal family or life-work balance. But I know many women who have, whether it is with family or deciding if they want to have a family or not, or getting a promotion and various other things. So I think it's getting better. And I feel very lucky to say I've felt very supported, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean it's not incredibly hard work and time and energy, but again, that's where like the passion, you need to have the passion to keep pushing, because it is continual pushing. I mean, and Christine, you know it from Artsy, I felt like there were days where I was pushing a boulder up a hill, explaining like why we needed to have an independent editorial voice, like why you need a copy editor and a fact checker, and I know BuzzFeed doesn't have one, but like things are going to change, and we are quality worthy of art. It's just like you have to have that energy and that drive and that passion and that community to do it, and yeah. So I guess it's like a personal time, energy sacrifice, but if you love it, then it doesn't feel like sacrifice.
I think one of the things you mentioned about Artsy, which I recall when I was there, is really having faith, and Zaha just mentioned that also, believing in yourself and also believing in the endeavor. And I think for a lot of the art world, like Spring Break or starting your own gallery or working in the art world, you really have to believe that it's worth your time and sacrifices. And I think that's part of the passion, is sort of getting you through that period where you're sort of, working through some, sort of uphill things.
And I think if we all are similar in wanting, that is giving back to the artists, or providing like platforms for people to get access to art. I mean, that to me is the most rewarding part of my job. So.
Yeah, sacrifices. I mean, as an artist, you never have enough time, ever. So yeah, when in producing shows and being invited to do other satellite things or curatorial projects, it's always that tug of war of, wait, do I need to just devote my time to being in the studio, or do I need to really focus on this opportunity? And I think that's always weighing it out for me. Fortunately, right now Spring Break only happens once a year, with some little pop-ups every now and again, maybe some more in the future. But it's nice that I don't have like a consistent work schedule in the studio because of this. I have to take long breaks. That said, this past Spring Break, I was in a show to show some paintings during Spring Break, and I hadn't finished the paintings because of production, so I set up my studio in the Spring Break office at Times Square and would go out on the floor and talk to people, and then run back in and paint for like 30 minutes, and then run back out on the floor. And the staff, which several of you are here, and I see you back there, were so supportive that I was able to do that. So it's also finding like your peer group who understands the demands and needs of doing these wacky things. Like, I'm not just an art fair creator, I'm many different things. So I think it's about time, sacrificing time, and also doing something like Spring Break. I mean, Andrew and I started this, we had no money, and we would put this on our credit card, and we kind of still do, but we just have faith and the passion to keep believing that it will continue to thrive.
I would love to use that as a segue, because each of you really spoke about time. And we're in New York City, the city that never sleeps. We all work 24/7, and I also think with technology, we're all available to some extent 24/7. But this is also, to me, one of the most international cities. We have this year, Sotheby's Institute has a class of students from nearly 20 countries around the world, and it's extremely diverse. This is the place, I think, in the art world where artists come together. You can have fairs, galleries, write editorial pieces, and pretty much come in contact with all aspects of the art world here in the city. So what, for each of you, is special about working in the New York art world, and what do you love about it?
Yeah, I think that something that I really love about New York is just how many opportunities there are. Nina, actually, for a show that's open right now, approached Jeffrey. It's the first time she's ever curated a project and was like, I want to curate a project and shed some light on artists who have been underrepresented, or people just they are incredibly talented and they just need to be out in the open, and also artists who just need a beautiful space to present their work. That I don't know where else that would happen, and for us to just be approached by an incredible idea like that. And I think something else that's really wonderful about New York is that if it's a hub, then you are able to take advantage of so many more opportunities outside of New York. We're opening our LA gallery with a presentation of Ai Weiwei on Saturday, actually, and so we've been all running around like chickens with our heads cut off, because it's a lot. We're a really small team, but just being able to balance both of those spaces and having a New York space and an LA space, it really lets you take advantage of anything. And it really just started out with Jeffrey opening the 2 gallery spaces in the 90s and having this incredible reputation that we are able to branch out and just explore so many other things.
Amber,
It's New
spring
York.
break in the South.
It's New York in the South. I don't know. I mean, I do like going out into America at large and seeing what's out there and taking art to those areas. But you know, New York is New York. It's exactly what you're saying. I'm here because of opportunities, and you know, there's good food. It's a melting pot. It's so diverse. I think that acceptance is so wonderful in this city. You can do anything, you can say anything, you can be anyone. Yeah, but I think that for the art market itself, you know, I'm optimistic that New York will remain a cultural destination. I fear that it's changing, and I think that we have to be strong to continue to make this a very, very strong place for people to come and feel like they can continue to express their ideas. I don't want New York to become a mall. Who needs a mall? Like, you can shop online. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, like, I do worry about real estate. I worry about all of those things that affects galleries. You see galleries closing all the time. And so that trickle-down thing can affect so many of us. For a spring break, we have a different model than typical art fairs, where we provide free exhibition space to curators and artists. Our model, it requires us to take a lot of risk, and for now it's working. We find vacant real estate, we find partners who want to support us and the program, so it's working for us. But I do worry about other art fairs and other galleries and other institutions that may have to make a big decision on whether it's worth it or not. Do you just go online? And what does that mean? Because when everything goes online, your community changes. And that, to me, is very important. And that's why I came to New York, is because of community. And so.
Well, I believe New York is definitely the center of the art world. And I think that, you know, this being the center of the art world at one point was Paris, with Montmartre and Picasso and Braque and Toulouse-Lautrec and all the impressions before that. And, you know, then I think it was eventually changed to the abstract expressionists, and in New York becoming the center of the art world. When I moved to New York in 1979, it was really the center of the art world, and, you know, arts, music, were all intertwined. And Studio 54 was a big part of it, where all the artists, all the art gallery owners, everybody would come. I met Warhol in Studio 54, and Bob Colacello, who's one of my closest friends now. I actually got a call from him today. He was the editor of Interview magazine, and I met him in the art world. And Calvin Klein, who was a big collector at the time, and these were all part of the art, the whole club culture, which has very, very closely connected to the art world, like Basquiat and Keith Haring. And I remember one night in Studio 54, Tony Shafrazi said, "Come with me, let's go get a blessing from Leo Castelli." Since he was opening his gallery on Mercer Street, and I was opening my gallery 6 months later, and we should get Leo's blessing because nobody could function without Leo's blessing in New York. So we both went, and he said, "Come over tomorrow." We both went, and Tony said, "Well, Leo, I supported you when I brought you all these, major clients to buy so many amazing artworks. This was for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Tehran, and you got involved with major Pollocks and Warhols and everyththing, and you made a lot of money. Now will you support me?" And Leo said, "Of course." And then, "Who's this little girl?" And it was me. And so he said, "I'll help you and I would go to him for advice, and he would pass on artists that were not his thing to others. So there was always a mentor like that in the art world those days, and he was so available. He was always standing in his gallery. He wasn't hidden in some back room, and I feel that then the world sort of went through the Basquiats and the Keith Harings, and that changed, and then another group came out in this. So I think New York is still the center of the art world, where you make connections, and you meet people, and the openings are happenings. So there is that individual contact. Yes, the art world has changed because of the internet, but then again, we wouldn't have survived this last 2 years without Artsy. I mean it. I mean, we have a lot of our sales come from Artsy now. So it's a matter of updating yourself and becoming open to new media, new digital, trying to sales things, Instagram, Artsy, and other online platforms in order to have a presence, and even your openings become. So it is true that being in the digital age has less interaction, but they both have to work hand in hand for now, at least, and they're both important.
Yeah.
That's great.
No, and I think really the partnership scenario in the community, it's like we're not replacing the in-person experience. That's never the intention. We're trying to connect more people to more art, and the hope is they want to see that art in person. I mean, online is never going to replicate the in-person experience. The interactions you have with dealers or artists themselves, if you can, or the work in front of you, you never get that online. And I can be quoted saying that you will never get that online, and that's not the intention. So I mean, in New York, I mean, thinking about specificity of location, I mean, the internet does give you also the access to places you may not ever be able to go or never thought you would go to, and through this interaction or access, you then want to get there in person. But speaking to New York and what makes it unique, I'm very biased, having grown up, but also have a love-hate with New York sometimes. But I do, taking all of these elements, I mean, I think warmth and openness, a little bit of grit, and lack of formality. I mean, I truly think New York is one of the only places I feel like the organic, cross-disciplinary community. You can have a dancer and a filmmaker and a musician or composer and a fine artist, really creating something together and being accepted by all their communities as art and culture. And to me, New York has always been unique in embracing that. I also, again, I grew up within it, and having a mother who was in dance and literature and in a community that was very much artist focused in Soho in the 80s at the time, which definitely changed. Speaking of commercial and retail and malls. I mean, Soho essentially became a mall in some sense. But you still have some of the energy of Jeffrey Deitch and some of the old places. That's still there. I totally understand what you're saying, though, Amber. It's like as artists are getting pushed out farther, or galleries are losing their spaces, you want to find, you as part of this community want to find a way to both understand that cities are growing and changing, but also still support the people who sort of make the city what it is. And that's we'll see the next few years and how that changes and shifts. And
Absolutely, and I think the art world is ultimately the people that are in it, and that's all of
Yeah.
us. And with that, I'd love to open it up to questions. So we have time for a few questions. So just raise your hand, and there's microphones going around. So, yeah. And just say your name and then ask your question.
Hi, my name is Alia, and I was just wondering if you guys could elaborate on some of the different, maybe one or two, this would be like a long question if not, but like one or two characteristics that you feel that you embody that have really like helped you achieve your goals in the art world. Like aside from experience, just something a little more personal, I guess, like characteristics.
Some would say I'm stubborn. Some. Yeah, no, I get my mind set on something and I'm determined to make it happen. So that's one thing.
I think flexibility is a big one.
It's like the opposite.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite. I was just thinking about how just putting together shows, things are going to go wrong, things are going to go right. You're going to mess something up. You're going to forget to email someone back or call someone back. So just not beating yourself up too much about those things and just pushing forward, because at the end of the day, whatever you're putting on or whatever you're trying to accomplish, it will happen. But just like not sweating the small things.
I think perseverance, never giving up, and being open and being available. Like all my artists can call me any hour of the day if they wish. My team can call me any time of the day if they wish. I think it's a lot of the times you look at the art world and you think that it's a snobbish sort of milieu, and in my gallery, if you walk in, you're greeted always, and I ask if there's any questions you have, please let us know. And we're always open to talking to everyone, and humility is one of the most important things that I find is important in any job, or any career, but I think in the art world the most, because this whole idea of being this white space and, having beautiful, people sitting in the front desk and being snobbish to you was a sort of modus operandi at one point, and I hated that. And I would walk in and know if you can't know a price, you can't. There's no information, and so I feel that is very important to. If I happen to be in the space, I take the person for a tour myself, and that's the way it should be, and not to. That snobbery in the art world is not my kind of thing.
yeah, I will just repeat in a similar way. I definitely think drive is one of those things, and perseverance, is very parallel to that, but also openness, humility, like a willingness to learn and grow, accept when you make mistakes, but just like that level of openness and will allow you to keep growing. Otherwise, you won't keep growing as an individually, professionally, in your career. I think just you have to have that combination of drive and humility or empathy and openness, yeah.
And one other thing I would like to add to that is that you have to know every detail of everything. I can hang you the most beautiful, perfect show. And everyone in my team should know that too, that you have to do everything. I clean the bathrooms if one day we need to. Mm-hmm. And I come and I do it in front of all my team so they know that if somebody else is not responsible, you're responsible for it. every time keeping the bathrooms clean. I think these are very important little details. If you're finishing toilet paper, replace it. So and I do it, and I take a broom and I start sweeping
Same in
the
a
floor
relationship too.
in front of everybody, and I say you need to do it.
The bathroom is important.
Very important.
Toilet
fresh
paper
direct
came
order.
up several times in the conversation. Any other questions from the audience?
It's the only place you can be alone.
Hi. First and foremost, thank you for taking the time to speak on this panel tonight. My name is Reb, and I was wondering if you had any advice for someone who might be a couple years into their career and looking to a different industry and looking to break into the art world.
What career?
So for instance, I work in social marketing, focused on other industries outside of art. Art's always been my passion, and so I guess now, what would be recommendations to break into the art world, whether it's going back to school, networking, consulting on the side? I guess like what's a good way to prioritize, just because, it's one thing when you're 22, it'd be different when you're a little bit older, and want to make sure you take advantage of your time that you have.
Good for you that you've come to learn a whole new profession, which is fantastic. And I think that for all of us, we need to always upgrade. So, I took a summer course at Harvard, and you need to learn more. And I think that's fantastic. And I think that even an art gallery needs someone who comes from another area than just being art history and art, because they bring another element to it. I remember once I interviewed, amongst many others, someone who just had an economics degree and business degree. And I said, well, why are you here? And she said, well, I'm very interested in the art world. I hired her. She ended up being my best sales director. She actually also, Jessica Davidson. She then came and she did the Sotheby's business degree here.
Interesting.
That's right.
That's great.
So Jessica was my best art salesperson ever, because she had that economic background and the business background. So there are areas you can get into in the art world, especially with auction houses. They want every kind of profession. Museums need that as well, because you can be in PR, you could be in law, you could be in business, and there is a place for you. So, and then you learn the art and you add to that. So it's perfect.
Great. There's a question over here.
So just coming from a business type of question here, for those of you who have a structure of employees of any kind, what would be the percentage of employees that you guys are able to take on in terms of full employment, in terms of W-2 kind of employment, or is everything 1099, or is it always freelancers that you guys are associated with? And if you are familiar with this part of your organization, what would you say is your biggest that allows you to have the biggest financial stability to be able to hold on to the business, to be able to move forward with what you're doing?
Is that?
I don't know. Artsy is a very big business. I mean, we're over 200 people now, so it's a complex. So we're mostly full-time employees. I think the majority of the employees are full-time, our revenue is primarily from gallery partners at this point, and subscriptions, and that certainly sustains the business. But of course, there are other revenue streams that are coming in and building and growing. So.
Yeah. For us, I don't know if you want to say something. For us, we're a really small team. There are only about 5 of us that are full-time, and then we work with really incredible freelancers. But in terms of revenue flow, Jeffrey has an art advisory business. We put on exhibitions. We partner and do private sales. We do a little bit of everything. I think it's just because Jeffrey has been in the business so long that we are able to take advantage of so many different opportunities. I mean, one is working with Gagosian to put on a show in Miami every year at the Moore Building, which we're doing again this year. So we just take advantage of any opportunity that we can, and because we are a really streamlined team, we can be flexible to do everything.
For spring break, it's a project. So because it happens once a year, we bring on an amazing team of freelancers. And then we have a couple of people who work with us throughout the year, just depending on what's happening, to help kind of continue the continuity of things. But it's not a full-time thing, just because I don't work spring break full-time. Andrew and I are not salaried. You know, it's still kind of like a passion project for us. So we do freelancers, and it's a great team when we have them, and then I hate to let them go.
We're a small team also. We have 6 people in New York and 5 people in Dubai, or 6 people in Dubai. And I feel that, as Alia said, when you're a small team, everybody does everything. And so I used to be actually in New York 17 people or so. And I feel much more is done now efficiently than when we were a bigger team. Like Sunday, everybody's passing on things. So I started like really, and as business also changed a little bit. And so we, felt that this was a better way of doing things. And everyone does everything, and it's great. A really camaraderie and good sort of communication between everyone. But there's many insecure days as well, because art world is not I'm not salaried, but I depend on all the deals we make. So we're dependent on sales. So we too also seek projects everywhere, and museum shows that then get our artists to another level. So art fairs, meet new clients, and so you go to a very secure situation, and then you become very insecure depending on the market. So.
Great. Well, I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll have a reception, and you can talk to the panelists. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Ray, and I'm just curious to know where you see each one of your careers or galleries or shows, and see where you might be in the next 10 to 15 years.
So long.
10 to 15 years.
Maybe even 5 years.
I don't know. I guess still working at a gallery. I don't know. That's even 5 years is kind of a long time from now. But I really love working with artists, so I want to continue doing that. I actually never wanted to work at a gallery before I started working with Jeffrey. After this program, I was like, nope, I'm not working with a gallery. Working at a gallery, that sounds terrible. And I've absolutely loved it. So I think for me, working at a gallery is my path.
In 5 years, spring break would be 13 years old.
Oh.
Which is insane. And I hope by then, expanding is hard, because as much as I want to expand and scale and grow, I also want to make art. So, that tug of war will always exist. But in thinking about scaling, I would love to grow spring break so that it's, financially stable enough to support an actual full-time staff, so that we could grow together. We could potentially do other cities, and kind of move it around. So, that's kind of a dream, is to be able to have that kind of support in-house, and then have other people thinking about some of the things that maybe I can't think about year-round, but someone else would be thinking of.
Leila, 5 years.
5 years from now? Well, my son says I'll never retire, so maybe 15 years from now. But my son works for me, so, and we did expand, and we went to Dubai, and it was amazing run so far, until the Middle East has been hit with a very big recession. due to many factors. So with President Trump, the way things worked in the Middle East have not been so great, and it's really hurt the region. One is that Qatar is totally isolated, and so being in Dubai, we lost $11 million of $billion for the just Dubai, city of Dubai, where the Qataris would bring business for restaurants, hotels, art galleries, whatever. Then the Iran deal, but it fell apart. You know, they have lost so much money, so here the clients don't come anymore. And then you have the Saudis, where half of our clients were arrested or their money was taken away. So, you know, all these people were very instrumental in the Dubai. So that has hurt us, but so we're sort of like riding the recession and trying to bring less sort of expensive artworks or trying to make sales and with a whole nother bracket of artists that, you know, to ride this wave. So I don't know about expanding anymore. And the 15 hours away, 15-hour flight away is quite a challenge. But I feel that New York will always, hopefully, be going strong, we hope. And we want to move back to the Upper East Side, which is our goal. So we'll see.
Wonderful.
5 years is like forever in internet world, but I certainly think in 5 years we'll have reached or closer to our mission, our vision, ultimately of a future where everyone's moved by art every day, but our mission of expanding the art market and bringing more business to more galleries of all levels. So I think we're certainly on the road to that and building more features and capabilities for our partners on the marketplace side. On my end, on editorial and brands, and I hope we can continue to grow. I'd like to build teams in different locations so we can have, you know, provide more coverage of places outside of North America and Western Europe. So that's definitely like a future vision. I think, you know, the art world is not one art world, it's many art worlds and many communities, and I'd certainly like to be covering more and more regional coverage and exposure for artists and galleries. So yeah, that's sort of that would be a 5-year plan, and yeah, I think it's achievable and positive.
Great. So on that wonderful, optimistic note, I'd like to thank all the panelists for joining us tonight, and thank you all for joining in this discussion. We have a little reception outside for those of you who can stay and mingle and talk to our panelists. So thank you so much for all coming.